Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our work session. Before we start, I'd like to ask City Attorney John Hessel to enter into the minutes comment about meeting remotely.
Thanks, Mayor. This is kind of like old times, but different, meaning that Section 610.015 of the Missouri Sunshine Law provides that members of the City Council who are not physically present in the council chambers can participate and vote on all matters when an emergency exists and the nature of the emergency is stated in the minutes. In this case, we would ask that the minutes reflect that we are obviously involved we're in the midst of a winter storm, and the City Council is meeting remotely for their own safety as well as the safety of the general public, because we really cannot traverse over to City Hall.
Thank you, John. First item tonight is a discussion about the Grant Trail application that is soon to be submitted, and I will just turn it right over to Russ.
Thank you, Mayor. As City Council is well aware, the city has been working for quite a while to develop an application for the Grants Trail extension into downtown. We've had a number of meetings to discuss what form that might take, talking about different segment lengths and so forth, and how certain aspects of it might be interchanged to create the best approach and the most feasible approach. So analysis has been continuing, and Jonathan would like to discuss with City Council here an approach that we feel is probably the most appropriate way to get funding for this project in staff's, I guess, opinion. So I'll let Jonathan explain that.
Thanks, Russ. Thank you, Mayor and Council. Yeah, so as Russ mentioned, or as you all know, we've been working on this project and working toward the application deadline of next Thursday, a week from today, actually. Little less than that. It's 4 p.m. is the deadline on next Thursday. So something that as we've been working toward the application after getting the guidance from you all on which alignment to pursue, something that came up, we participated in voluntary preliminary submission to East West Gateway, as well as a project review workshop that they offer voluntarily, which allows us to get some preliminary feedback. And so we did those, and the feedback was positive. But as we all knew going into this, the budget, right, the funding request is hefty for this, right? We were requesting the maximum $7.5 million allowed in this round per project, for a total project budget of about $9.4 million. But you know, the whole time, throughout the planning process, that's been the goal of this project to make that whole connection from downtown to the current trailhead, and to do it in a way that's comfortable and accessible for all users. So we still feel like this project is valuable to that end. However, the biggest piece of feedback that we received multiple times was a question about phasing the project because of the cost. So we hadn't really, we had discussed it early on in the project internally, but hadn't really given it much thought because of the importance of the project as a whole. However, after recently this past month getting that feedback, we did want to bring that discussion to you all and get input on it. Basically what we would propose is an option where we would submit 2 applications this round for the project, one and in 2 phases. So we would submit a Grants Trail Extension Phase 1 and a Grants Trail Extension Phase 2, so that we're still submitting for the whole project, right? And if they believe, like we do, that it's important and worthy of funding as a whole, they could fund both phases. However, it gives them the option, it gives us the option to receive funding for roughly half of the project. And the way that we see that, if you all do want to consider that, what we would be looking at is, like I said, 2 phases. Leffingwell, splitting it at Leffingwell, that's about the midpoint of the corridor. However, a little counterintuitive maybe is what we would term the phasing. So phase 1 we would recommend being Farmers Market to Leffingwell, the western portion, because that makes the strong connection to all the attractions and everything downtown. That's one reason. And then once you get to Leffingwell, you would then continue on the on-road, the existing bicycle network on-road that's there now, right? So again, not our preference. We would prefer to do the whole thing off-road, right? That's still our preference. But if they don't feel like giving us this whole 7.5 million, we would have this as a phased approach. So you would take the off-road trail from the farmer's market to Leffingwell, go on-road, and then continue up Scott to Monroe, down Holmes, the same way anybody would bicycle along the marked route today. And then phase 2 obviously would be Leffingwell to the trailhead. And so the other piece I'll say is the cost breakdown. So actually of those 2 phases, the western one towards downtown is cheaper. It's estimated to be about 3.7 million for the western portion versus 5.7 for the eastern portion, or 5.6. So the biggest difference there is actually property acquisition on the eastern portion with the railroad spur. Yep, exactly. So we think this is just an idea, again, after the initial feedback we got, and that our consultant Horn and Schifrin had some discussions. We had some discussions with them, and they felt like this was if the council wanted to pursue this option, it's viable. Even in this last week, we would be essentially submitting all the same support documentation for both grants because they rely on each other. However, we would, change the cost schedules and the narratives to reference the phased approach at this point. So I will leave it there. Russ, anything else you needed me to touch on before?
Well, I do want to touch on just the fact that we understand that there is a higher likelihood that the phase from downtown to Leffingwell will score higher. We've already run sample scores with our consultant and even discussed with East-West Gateway the fact that phase 1, which would be downtown and then eastward, is would be the higher scoring of the 2 phases.
Yeah, that's correct. It's a good point. Obviously, it makes that stronger connection to downtown. And if you just think about a connection from the trailhead to Leffingwell, it's not leading to anything, right? Or not getting you to resources.
I can also see a side benefit here in a way that if they were to fund only phase 1 and say, well, we can't do the full 7.5 million grant, but we'll do phase 1. That leaves basically a completed section of trail, then a gap, and then a completed section of trail. It's easier to fill in a gap than it is to extend. And I think you can make a selling case for a future grant application, either through East-West Gateway or possibly through direct infrastructure grant funding that is coming through the new $1.2 trillion funding cycle, that we could fill in that gap should that gap be created. That's what I would consider a definition of a shovel-ready project, and that's what they're always looking for, because it's already been designed as far as the planning aspect. So I think there's that side benefit that if we only get half the funding, we still have a decent shot, we believe, at the other half. Whereas if you submit the entire grant as it is, and this comes down to the scoring again, because it is so expensive, it doesn't have a real good shot of being funded at all. Is that not true, Jonathan?
I'd say that's probably true.
When I say a real good shot, let me put it this way. We've been advised that putting it into phases gives it a better shot of getting some funding.
Yeah, absolutely. During the project review workshop, one of their first comments was, you realize that's 15% of the whole budget for the region, right? And we said, yes, we do. And we know that's the most you can give us. We think it's that important of a project. It was very clear, and they weren't saying, nothing to do with the merit of the project, but it's just a big request. So
it's a big ask.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
Right. And by phasing, we're lowering our ask a little bit, but still asking for the full amount if they feel it's worthy.
Okay.
All right. So you hit on it. I'm sorry, Jonathan and Russ, were you finished?
Yeah, I am.
Okay. So you kind of hit on it that you go in with just one big project and it's turned down. The chances of coming back at a later date the next year are probably very hindered by that. Whereas if you phase it, if they award a phase one grant, it is possible to come back at some point to East-West Gateway with a phase two, or as you say, infrastructure money or something.
Yes, I think once phase one is built, phase two becomes more feasible and will score better because it's connecting to completed areas.
Gotcha. All right. Questions, comments from council? Wallace, we'll start with you.
Yeah, a couple of things. One, do we know, and this is an arbitrary time frame here, the last 3 years has Gateway, East-West Gateway, have they allocated 100% of the money they have available to them?
They've awarded all of that. I don't know offhand, what's been paid out or anything like that. But and honestly, I guess Councilmember Ward, I can't tell you to the penny. I think
No, I just wondered if there was money left on the table, and that if they're being critical of us asking for a high ask, and at the end of the day they don't distribute it all, then that seems kind of a flawed process.
I think it depends on the projects that are requested, right? There's going to be some, because of the increments of projects and their costs, it may not be an exact alignment, but they award as much as they can every year, pretty much. So.
Okay, and then I'm asking you to be a little psychic here. Is it somewhat of a wink and nod that if we're going to fund you for this portion, we logically want to get that middle section? If from the perspective of East-West Gateway.
Yeah, I don't. I would like to think that is the case, that if they fund a phase one, especially, so there is also the chance we're going to approach it as phase one being west and phase two being east. If for some reason, and we think phase one scores better, if for some reason they discuss it and decide differently, they could still award us phase two and not phase one, right? Or they could award both. So, however, I would think it would be, it always depends on the competition, but it would seem logical that if they were in support of phase one of the project, that phase two would also gain support and have a lot of the same merit as phase one.
Okay, and last point, this 80-20?
That's correct.
So we'd be looking at a little under 800,000 if my math makes sense.
Yeah, so the overall, for the first phase, it's 3.7. Yeah, so we're looking at just about $750,000 local match for phase one. And then with the bigger budget of phase two, it's about 1.1. So again, still the same number, overall numbers we talked about, just under 2 million between the two phases for local match, with a total budget about 9.4, federal ask of 7.5.
Okay, and then one more, Russ, probably to you. Since this is on a reimbursement basis, when would we get that? What does that look like? What's the time frame once approved? And we've expended the money, how quickly would we get that back into our treasury?
It would have to be according to the timeline that the application outlines. And I believe the application would have the funding go through starting in FY24. Is that correct, Jonathan?
I don't have that. That
You
sounds
don't have
right, Russ. Yeah, I don't have it in front of me right now. I
But
apologize.
it's not going to be for this October's federal funding. It's the following October fiscal year, because the Fed fiscal year starts October 1. They don't award these until summertime, sometime May, June, somewhere in that range. So it won't be for this coming fiscal year. It will be for the following fiscal year. And then as far as our reimbursement with MoDOT, our reimbursement is typically, and I say MoDOT through East-West Gateway, 3 to 4 months typically, but we can't guarantee that. Depending on any number of situations, it's a review, it's a federal project, there are grant requirements that have auditing aspects. So, you know, our best shot is 3 to 4 months once we make a payment to see the 80% return to us. But it's not always that soon.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thanks. Kara?
I guess my only concern would be, you know, if the west side is so much stronger, well, not so much stronger, but a better candidate than the east side, would we be kind of putting ourselves at a disadvantage by taking away that higher score by separating it? You know, like, is it not improving? Is it enhancing that second half that would then become a gap that maybe we would be, you know, setting ourselves up for failure then?
I think alone, like looking at them separately, the phase one, the western half scored better comparing the two, but as an infill phase, so phase two being the eastern half as an infill project, it would still be making that safer connection to all the things that phase one offers, right? So I don't believe, in my opinion, it would still benefit from the strengths of the first phase.
Excellent. Thanks.
I would concur with that as well.
Liz, anything?
I think it all makes sense, and I would feel guilty, maybe is the word, I'm not sure, or that they make this recommendation and then we don't abide by it. You know, we say, oh no, we're going to ask for the full amount. The only big concern that I have is would we have the possibility of losing the opportunity to purchase that land from UP, the unused rail, that
Right,
I mean, we know that there's already somebody was trying to purchase it. We know it was Aerobox. I mean, is there any kind of agreement with Aerobox that I don't know. That's my only concern.
Yeah, and I don't know that I have a good answer for it. I mean, you know, it's always, I mean, it's a little bit of a risk now, right? We don't have anything under contract, so it's always a risk we take. And if we go a phased approach and we aren't awarded both phases and phase two gets delayed, sure, it just allows more time for something to happen without us. But I think we just need to continue we have had open discussions with the adjacent property owners, and we'll continue to do that and see if there's partnership opportunity. We've continued to talk to them about that benefits all parties involved. And, you know, I think it would still be the same risk, you know, if we asked for the whole project and then we're denied because of the cost, right? We'd be back to the same point. So
Yeah, that's all.
All right. Maggie?
Thank you, first of all, to Russ and Jonathan and Liz as well. Well done. I think this sounds like the logical way to go, and really Leffingwell to Grant is not a bad ride. There's virtually no traffic, and I've done it many times, and it's not a bad ride. So I'm not concerned about that second half, however long we have to have it without a designated path. That's it.
Thank you. Mark?
Yes. Some of my questions are already answered. Thank you. So did East West Gateway give any indication if these are split apart and phase two is submitted afterwards, how does that stand up by itself versus, you know, the whole project at once? You know, phase one, obviously, since it's less money, it's going right into downtown. You know, there's a certain public appeal to do that. But as Maggie said, it's pretty quiet for phase two. Is there any concern about that?
I mean, to answer the first part of it directly, they didn't, the initial project review workshops, they are helpful, right? But it's a little more informal process, and it's kind of, it's a conversation, discussion, feedback. And so, I mean, I think by them asking about phasing it, it indicates that they think it was really about funding. I know I'm repeating myself, but I don't think that they think either of the phases were less important or less worthy. It was just in any given year, they would be funneling a lot of money for the region to one place, right?
Yep.
And it could be, and this doesn't guarantee it either, right? We all know that, but it would just be possibly more
Feasible.
feasible and
Yeah.
well received if it was spread out over a couple, over 2 different years request.
Sure. And it makes sense because you're right. This is a big ask, and if we're splitting this up, then it probably helps our chances.
To be honest,
Very good.
I'm sorry.
Oh, no, good, Jonathan.
Well, I was just going to say, we had talked about this early on, and I really personally wasn't in favor of just submitting for one phase because I think that kind of lessens the impact. And the way that we approached it with the community, right, is this is the project, right? And it still is the project. And I still feel like we're representing it that way in applying for 2 different projects all at once, because that's our preference. We think it's important. We've made that case. However, we don't want the whole thing to fail if there's an opportunity to present it. So it's really putting a little bit of the pressure on East West Gateway, right? Saying we're applying for both. We'll be happy with half this year and half next year, but we definitely want both. So.
Thank you, Jonathan.
All right, very good. Anything else from council on this? Jonathan, Russ? All right,
Nope.
well, I'm definitely hearing consensus, if not unanimity, that council is in favor of doing the phased approach as presented. So
All right.
I say then move forward.
Great. I appreciate it very much.
Great.
Good.
Thank you.
Yeah, Russ, you have what you need from council?
We do.
Okay, very good. All right. All right, with that, we need to go into closed session for legal, personnel, and negotiations. Is there a motion to go into closed session?
Motion.
All right, we've got a motion and a second. Any questions or comments? All right, roll call, please.
Mayor Griffin,
Yes.
Member Ward,
Yes.
Councilmember Wertz,
Yes.
Councilmember Gibbons,
Yes.
Councilmember Sears is currently absent, Councilmember Dewey,
Yes.
Councilmember Zimmer.
Yes.
All right, so now we need to leave this meeting and ask everyone to get right back in on the closed session link.